Today we're going to be installing our cabinet pulls. And I think it's such a bummer when you get all your cabinets installed nice. I've seen a lot of times where people's cabinet pulls are just like a little bit crooked or a little bit not right. And so we're going to do these and I'm going to show you how to get them exactly right. For me, that starts with using a better style of jig. So when I first started renovating houses, however many years ago, I would buy these jigs and it was just like you could, it was plastic, it had these little holes in it and you could draw the lines where you wanted to drill, but it wasn't like if you had a weird size of pull and it didn't exactly line up the way you wanted to, you had to pick or you had to guess a little bit. And so I really like this style of jig that allows you to make a ton of adjustments. And that's one like this. And it looks like a lot and a little bit intimidating, but it really isn't. And these are actually pretty cheap online. And so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna install, I'll show you a couple different directions. I'll show you one this way. I'll show you one the other way. I'll show you what I do when the measurements are tricky and how to get them right every time. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I have adjusted this slightly. So this jig comes and you have a couple things. You have this piece that we're going to tighten on the bottom to go to the bottom of the cabinet. We have the piece we're going to tighten over here. This can flip, so I flip this way, this slides off and we'll tighten it. So if you go the other way, you can only come so far. So sometimes you got to turn this weird and adjust these to get it to fit with your cabinet. So that's why I flipped it this way. And so the first thing I'm going to do, I hate to measure. I feel like measuring leaves room for error a lot of times. And so anytime I cannot measure, I'm going to avoid that to figure out my exactly in the middle line. So rather than trying to measure my vertical line on my cabinet, and honestly, I don't even have a measuring tape, so I wouldn't be able to. But say this was 2 inches, half is 1, right? 3 inches, half is 1.5. But say it's some weird fraction decimal on a tape measure, and you don't even know how to find half of that. A lot of times in my head I go, oh, it's the line between something 16ths and the next 16ths, right? Sometimes we have to break it down more than that to make it straight. And so instead of trying to measure it, I don't do that. I'm going to take something that doesn't stretch. So I always just use painter's tape because I tend to have that around, but just don't get like a string or rubber band or something you can stretch out. And I'm just gonna make a straight piece. Follow me here because I know this is like, what is she doing? And then what I do, the bottom of my pull I'm gonna line up right here. But I want it to be centered, right? I don't want it here or I don't want it there. And so I need to find the exact center of this and I don't have a tape measure or say it was like some weird obscure measurement. Then what I do is I make a line on the end, just so I know where to trim it. So this is the width of my vertical piece of my cabinet. So rather than trying to measure it and figure out what that is, doesn't matter, I don't care. I'm gonna fold this in half. That's my center point. So you can either write on your cabinet or you could just put a line here so we have, something we can make our marks on, and then it also makes it, if you have tape and you drill, it's less likely to damage your finish as much when you're drilling in. So I've done that because now I'm gonna take this, and so sometimes you can just look at it and see the fold and you know that's your middle point, but it also, sometimes what I like to do, just so it's a little more visible for me, is just take my pen, pencil, marker, whatever I'm working with, and trace my fold, so that's my center mark. Let's get you closer. So then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold this on here and I'm gonna give myself a couple of places just to mark that line. So I'm gonna do one on right there, and then I'm not going up that high because it's not a huge pull. But just so I'm aligning, I have something to look at when I'm looking through my jig. So that's my center line. And so now what I'm gonna do is I want to make sure that when I adjust this, and sometimes just to make these a little more visible, we'll put a Sharpie mark on there. I want to be able to look through the holes because that's where I'm going to drill, and we'll worry about this measurement next. We're just going side to side. I want to look through and see that center line. And so I'm going to put this on here and I'm going to pull this over this way. gonna tighten it, and then I'm gonna slide it down to make sure it looks good everywhere. And what I'm also gonna do real quick is tighten this, because this is wobbling a bit on me. I know my bottom is, let's get that snug. Okay. So when I look through the hole, I think my line is not completely centered. I think it's more to the left. So I'm actually gonna shift, I'm gonna loosen this, and I'm gonna slide that way a little bit. Then we'll tighten it, and then we'll look again and see, do those look centered? Now it's like right in the middle of my hole, which that's what I want. But the other thing is I gotta tighten this, and that might make a bit of an adjustment. So what we're gonna do next is I like to figure out the spacing. I know where I want my bottom center of my hole to be, right? Because I'm lining it up with my cross here. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take I don't know if I have a ruler, let me find something straight. So I'm gonna draw a straight line across. So we have that. So right here, that's where our bottom hole is gonna be. And then we're gonna adjust everything off of that upward. So first what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this on here, and I'm gonna use, so this is just my spacer up here. This one doesn't have to really be at any particular height. That's just gotta be out of my way. So I'm gonna tighten this one, just so it's not moving around on me like crazy. And then this bottom one, I'm gonna slide up to where looking through my hole in my crosshairs, I'm lined up right there. Snugging that one up, snugging that one up. And then after that one's tight, what I like to do is I'm going to take my pole, and I'm using my pole as the spacer, right? We're gonna just go ahead and put it on here. And you don't have to tighten it all the way, but we just need to figure out how far we need to space out these top and bottom holes. And if you don't tighten it all the way, just make sure you but if you do it kind of off, you're gonna get a jankety measurement. So make sure you put it flat like if it was on the cabinet, and then tighten this one. So now this and this, we've adjusted this off our cabinet, we've adjusted this off our cabinet, and then we've adjusted this to the height of we know our base is where it needs to be on here, or on our cabinet, but now we have the actual distance that these two need to be from each other. And I just make sure they're nice and snug. And then what I do is now we're gonna take this off, and then we're going back to our cabinet. So now we have our spacing right there. I've done this two ways. I have put this up, made sure everything was how I wanted it, and I have clamped it on and actually drilled through these holes, or I have held this up and just used this to make my marks and just drilled through. I don't have a lot of clamps here today, so today I'm just going to use this. That one's marked really well, and then I'm gonna make my line up here, and it's right in the center, and then I make sure it's right on. So I have my lines, and it looks a little crooked because I didn't put this piece of tape on right. It's just kind of at a cant, so don't worry about that. So I have my original crosshairs in that line, and then I like to just do this just as a double check to make sure it doesn't look crazy, and that's gonna be about my location. And then again, you could have clamped it on, and I've done that and drilled through, or you can just use that as a template. So then now that comes with the kit, I have this drill bit that's gonna be what I drill with. I'm also going to put another piece of tape on the back side of my cabinet, because the tape is gonna help, just when you drill through this finish, it just spins it out sometimes. So hopefully this helps it not be so damaged when I drill my hole. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this on the end of my drill. Make sure you don't have a shelf behind it you're gonna drill into, or depending on how low it is, say you were putting a pole down here or something, make sure you're not drilling into that. If you're not confident in your ability to drill straight, I would just clamp this on, and you really can just drill straight through this hole, but then you wanna make sure your template doesn't move. So again, I'm just gonna do this because I don't have many clamps or anything like that over here, but it's got a nice point, so you really can put your point on the center. This came with the kit, and then go ahead. And then the nice thing is that's a little bit bigger than your screw, so you have a little bit of wiggle room if you have, you know, nothing's ever exactly straight. Now we're gonna do the same thing up here. Now just double checking one more time, because if I mess it up, I gotta order a new door, which I don't want. So I'm gonna put my center right on the center of my. So now we can go ahead and pull our tape off. Pull it off back here, which it did tear up the back of our cabinet, even though we taped it a little bit. I don't know how you avoid that. I really hate that. And then, so my poles come with 2 sets of screws, which is pretty common. You have a longer set and a shorter set. And we're gonna, in our case, use the shorter set of screws. And then we're just gonna go ahead and push that through and start to tighten it. Now, I don't do it all the way. I just kind of do a little bit. And then I do here. Because if you tighten one down all the way and then you try to do the next one, it's gonna be hard to get them lined up. So I do that. And then you either, this one has a Phillips head, so you could either use a drill or you could use a screwdriver if you have it. You just don't wanna, if you're doing a drill, do it slowly so you don't overdo it. And there you go. So then now we're gonna go ahead and go over here and do the next one. But before we move on, instead of switching my jig, I'm gonna go ahead and do, the spacing is gonna be the same for upper left cabinets and lower right cabinets. And then it's gonna be the same for this one as the lower left. So I'm just gonna flip my jig around and do all of those so I don't have to keep adjusting it. So let's go, let me show you an example. So this is our upper left. Now we're gonna go under our bathroom or our kitchen sink and do a bottom right. And I just wanna show you what I mean. So this was our jig for here. If we flip it this way, for the lower cabinet, it's gonna be the same thing. So now coming down here, and we'll get this set up, I just wanna show you how easy that was to switch from here to here. As long as you have the same style and profile, now we're gonna use this here. So we're gonna get all of our upper left to our bottom rights, then we'll reset it. Now for the opposite cabinet, you're gonna do the exact same thing in reverse to adjust your jig. So after you do that, we're gonna move on to a drawer because that is a little bit different. So I'm gonna show you how to do that as well. Now we're gonna do our first drawer. So the big thing is you have to figure out how you want your pole to be set up. You have a few options. Some people like to place their pole at the top of the cabinet drawer, and some people like to place it in the center. It's just a design preference. So we're talking about, do you want it here or do you want it here? And then you got to keep in mind, if you have a cabinet like this where the top drawer is different than the bottom 2 drawers, what looks better? Is it better to have it here or is it better to have it here? I always lean, my preference is I like them to be centered. That's just aesthetically what I like most, but you are installing these yourself. So of course you can do whatever it is you want. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mark of, or put a piece of tape on here just so I can draw on here. I've done this before, I've done pencil marks too, and then I just erase them, so you don't have to do these tape pieces, but I just have a pen. So that's why I'm leaving my, my tape on there. So I'm gonna do what I did before, where rather than measuring and find the half point, which you're more than welcome to do, but I am not great at measuring and getting things right, I am going to find this length and fold it in half to get dead on my center. So I just need a piece to be longer. Okay, I'm gonna set this aside because if I need it again for those, I can use it. Now, I wanna see how tall this is. And so then we know half of our height is there. So I'm going to put a piece of tape on there at my approximate area because I want to be able to mark my center line, which is there. So then what we're gonna do is I have set my jig up now this way. I took the flat end piece off. We just need the flat top piece. And so the first thing I'm gonna do is I am going to align this so the center of the height is where my halfway line is. Okay, and now to get these, I've made sure to center this on the middle. So this has a 0 line and then you have your measurements out. So you could of course measure it, but to me, the easiest thing is just to do what we've done before and use our pole to line this up and then even it out in the middle. So I am once again going to just attach these on here. And we're at about, if we look at it, maybe the line before 6.5 centimeters. Sorry, I don't know the measurements for centimeters. So now we have our spacing evenly on each side because we pushed that and lined it up. I can go ahead and remove the pole. So that's my crosshair that when I look through this hole, I'm gonna be able to center. So that line at the top didn't even really matter. So I'm centering there, and that's just to line me up. Remember, my two holes are these two side lines, and so we're gonna do here, and we're gonna do here. And I always like to just hold it up and kind of see what it looks like before I drill. But the thing you gotta keep in mind is your tape, you probably didn't get it on there straight, so it might look off because you didn't put that tape on lined up that you're drawing all your lines on. I'm gonna make sure I don't have anything in my drawer I'm gonna hit. And this is gonna be thicker to drill through because now you have the front like we did on the cabinet, but you have that back piece that's the structure of the drawer. So we'll probably use our longer screws here. So I'm gonna get that on there and I'm gonna drill through. So then we're gonna go ahead and take all of our tape off. When you go onto your next drawer, at least in this case, this is the same width, so I'm gonna be able to use this again. Height is not the same, obviously, so I'm gonna have to make another one of these. But then when I come to this one, same height, be able to use this again to make my line. Length is not the same, I'll have to make another one. So I save these until I'm done because a lot of your cabinet sizes are gonna repeat. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this on here and get the drawers finished.